Okay, so today we're going to be talking about lesson 5.2, which is all about equivalent ratios and how we can use multiplication and division to find equivalent ratios. So first, let's talk about what an equivalent ratio is. So an equivalent ratio are ratios that express the same relationship. So they're equal, they have the same relationship or same pattern. So those are equivalent ratios. So let's look through some examples to see what that would actually look like. So example 1 says, for every 16 basketball players in Crystal County schools, there are 48 soccer players. If the ratio remains constant and there are 64 basketball players, how many soccer players are there? So first, let's write this relationship as a ratio. So if it's saying 16 for every 48 soccer players, I can write that as 16 to 48. Remember, I have 3 ways I can write my ratios. So to find equivalency, I'm going to go ahead and there's 2 ways we can do this. The first way I'm going to show you guys is just by using a table. I'm going to do basketball players on top and then soccer players on the bottom. So if I'm starting with 16 and 48, and I know that this pattern is remaining constant, so every time I add 16 basketball players, I'm adding 48 soccer players. So in this case, you're using repeat addition, which is the same as multiplication. So in this case, I'm going up by 16 each time. And so instead of adding 16 every single time, which you can do, you go through and add 16. But the fast way would just to be using multiplication. So the first time this is my second, so I'd be multiplying by 2. My third, I'd be multiplying by 3, by 4, and by 5. So, and same with the bottom. So let's start at 16. If you do 16 times 2, you have 32. 16 times 3, you have 48. 16 times 4, you have 64. And 16 times 5, you have 80. Down the bottom, you have 48. You're multiply again by 2, by 3, by 4, and by 5. And one thing I want to mention to you guys, if I didn't already in our previous video, is whenever we're dealing with ratios, because we're wanting to deal with equivalency, whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom, whether that's in a ratio table, dealing with the top of the ratio table to the bottom of the ratio table, or whether you're dealing with the in fraction form, top and bottom. So whatever you do to the top or to one part of the ratio, you have to do to the other. So in this case, I'm still multiplying by the same. So I'm going to do 48 times 2, which is 96. 48 times 3 is 144. 48 times 4 is 192. And 48 times 5 is 240. And so all of these ratios in this table, 16 to 48, 32 to 96, 48 to 144, these are all equivalent because they have the same relationship. So these are equivalent ratios. The other way that we could have done this, instead of making a table, we could have just multiplied by the same number. So 16 to 48. In this case, it wanted us to get to 64 basketball players, so we could have just asked ourselves, okay, what do we have to multiply 16 by to get to 64, which we know is 4. So whatever you multiply the top by, you're going to multiply the bottom by. So 48 times 4 is 192. And this would have showed us our equivalent ratio as well. The other way that you can check for equivalency is by using cross multiplication, which I will show you in a further example. But this right here is how we can use multiplication to find equivalent ratios. So let's try now if we wanted to do division. So example 2 says, Sarah made baskets on some of her shots in the basketball game. If she continues to make baskets at the same rate, how many baskets will she make in her next 6 shots? So our ratio here is 18 to 12. So again, we can make a ratio table. We're starting with 18 to 12. And I can just start dividing. I know I can divide 18 by 2. If I divide 18 by 2, I know I get 9. Remember, whatever you do the top, you do the bottom. So if I divide 18 by 2, I'm going to divide 12 by 2, which is going to get me 6. Oops. And then I know I can, divide again. I can do 18 divided by 3, which 18 divided by 3 is 6, which is what we wanted to get to. We wanted to get to shots here, 6 shots. And then remember, whatever I do the bottom, whatever I do the top, I have to do the bottom. So I'm going to do 12 divided by 3, which is 4. So my answer here is for every 6 shots, she makes 4 baskets. So for every 6 shots, we're making 4 baskets here. So that's one way we can set the table and use division that way. The other way is we can just set up our ratio 18 to 12. I know I wanted to get to 6 shots, and we have shots on top. So I had to think about, if I'm getting to 6 shots, what am I dividing by here? If I'm doing 18 to 6, I know I'm dividing by 3. So whatever I divide the top by, I'm going to divide the bottom by. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So then you get your answer there. For every 6 shots she takes, she makes 4 baskets. And again, because we're multiplying by the same, these 2 ratios are equivalent. So there's 2 ways you can do it with multiplication division. You can make a table, or you can use your fractions and multiply by the same number to get your equivalent ratio. All right, so I want you guys to try this one. It says Rashida uses 8 cups of tomatoes. So she has 8 cups of tomatoes for every 3 cups of onions. And it says, how many cups of onions should she use if she's only going to use 4 cups of tomatoes? So again, you can use a table if you want. I'm just going to set this up in fraction form. If she's only going to use 4 cups of tomatoes, how would you figure out how many cups of onions she should use? So think about here, it's getting smaller, so we're using division. What are you dividing by on the top that you have to divide by on the bottom to get your answer? So we should know we're dividing by 2 here. So if I divide 3 by 2, I'm going to get 1.5. So she should use 1.5 cups of onions for every 4 cups of tomatoes. You also could have set that up in the division as a table, and use division the same way. So it's either or, whichever you guys feel more comfortable with. All right, last thing we're going to talk about here is giving a ratio and seeing which ones are equivalent. So it says, which of the following ratios are equivalent to 9 to 12? So one way you can do this is you could create a ratio table and use your division and multiplication to find equivalency. I think the easier way to do that is to use our cross multiplication method. So I'm going to go ahead and write out 9 to 12 here. I'm just going to start right off the bat with 3 to 4. I'm going to set this up with my cross multiplication. I'm going to question myself and say, do these equal each other? So remember, with our cross multiplication, we use our butterfly method. So I'm going to say 12 times 3, does this equal 9 times 4? You're going to say 12 times 3, we know is 36. And is this equal to 9 times 4? Yes, it is. 36 equals 36. So 3 to 4 is an equivalent ratio. So let's try 9 to 12. Let's try 2 to 3. So we have 9 to 12. And once you find an equivalent ratio, you could also use that one. So I could use 3 to 4 here, and I could say, is 3 to 4 equivalent to 2 to 3? Since 9 to 12 is equivalent. But I'm just going to keep up with the 9 to 12. Set this up. Use my cross multiplication here. We have 12 times 2. Is this equal to 3 times 9? So we know 12 times 2 is 24. And we know that 9 times 3 is 27. So these are not equivalent. So 2 to 3 is not an equivalent ratio. 6 to 9. So if we have 9 to 12, is this equal to 6 to 9? So I have 12 times 6. Is this equal to 9 times 9? So 12 times 6 is 72. Is this equal to 9 times 9, which is 81? These are not equivalent, so 6 to 9 is not an equivalent ratio. Last one, if we have 9 to 12, oops, was writing it the wrong way. If we have 9 to 12, is this equal to 12 to 16? So I have 12 times 12, and is that equal to 9 times 16? So 12 times 12 I know is 144. Is this equal to 9 times 16? Yes, because 9 times 16 is also 144. So our three equivalent ratios here are 3 to 4, 9 to 12, and 12 to 16. All right, so I want you guys to try it one on your own. So which of the following are equivalent to 16 to 20? So you have 4 different ratios here. Which of them are equivalent to 16 to 20? So if you want to set this up in a table format and use multiplication division, you can. Or if you want to set them up like I did using cross multiplication, whichever way you think that makes the most sense. Which of these 4 are equivalent to 16 to 20?